If you found being stuck at home in the heatwave unbearable last week, be grateful that you weren't somewhere far worse. For just the small sum of £1,500, you could have attended the annual conference of the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, the ARC, in London, alongside Nigel Farage, Kemi Badenoch, and a load of other leading lights of the right wing. ARC, described as the anti-woke Davos, featured senior UK politicians, US Energy Secretary Chris Wright, psychologist Jordan Peterson, thought he'd disappeared, and a host of representatives from the European far right. The event is funded by US fossil fuel interests, Trump donors, and anti-abortion groups. Badenoch used her speech to brand Ed Miliband as a villain who has made Britain poorer, saying this: "We need to make sure that this man should not be let anywhere near the levers of power, not the Energy Department or anywhere else." Perhaps more interesting than the demonization of the UK's Energy Secretary and potentially future Chancellor, senior officials from AI giant Anthropic used the conference to seek moral guidance from that crowd. DSMOG reports that Chloe Lubinsky, Anthropic's lead on research partnerships with the world's faith and philosophy traditions, told an audience at ARC this: "We need informed critics who will tell the labs when we're failing. And we need moral voices that the incentives cannot bend. That is why you're here. We need you to help us see what we, from inside the labs, cannot see." I have no idea what she's after there. Anthropic has looked to distinguish itself, by the way, from in the AI space, rather, as a more moral company than its rivals. The company has donated millions of dollars to politicians who support regulating the industry, and it refused a request from the US Defense Department to use its software to train lethal weapons system. So it seems odd that Anthropic should be seeking guidance from a group of wealthy far-right activists. Perhaps they're just looking outside of their comfort zone. Barry, what do you think? What are they doing there?
Give me strength. I'm going to be really cynical about Anthropic here. I don't think they're an ethical AI firm at all. And I don't think there's any such thing right now. I think that they're posturing. I think that Dario Amodei, the CEO, has always adopted this, I think, as a pose in order to make them seem different to the other companies such as OpenAI. I mean, yeah, look, for all that he says that they're different, they did strike a deal with the Department of Defense in the US. Okay, finally, they balked a little bit where they said, we don't want our tools to be used for mass surveillance, and we don't want them to be used for autonomous weapon systems. And for anyone who might not know, an autonomous weapon system is not just one where the AI chooses the target, it's where the AI decides to pull the trigger. Absolutely terrifying. So, okay, he drew the line there. And to be fair, the reaction from the US government was incredibly aggressive. Pete Hegseth said that they were doing it because of woke. I think he also called Amodei an ideological lunatic, and Donald Trump called him a left-wing nut job. But like outside of the rhetoric, they did do something material to Anthropic, which was they registered them as a company of a supply chain risk, which means that they're barred from all military contracts and doing deals with people related to the US military and suppliers and et cetera, et cetera. That never happened to an American firm before. It had only ever happened to foreign companies. So look, it did do them some damage. But am I to believe that he didn't know what he was getting into when he signed a deal with the Department of Defense? They also have a deal with Palantir. Like, they're also working with Palantir. How ethical is that? And then when you look into their ethics a little bit deeper, you'll see the Western media will always point to things where they'll say, well, Anthropic announced that it wasn't going to sell its products to any companies that were majority owned by the Chinese or the Russians or the Iranians or the North Koreans. Okay, great. But you're going to sell them to the US, military establishment. You're not drawing a line under there, although, you had it. That's a little bit too far if you're,
You had some technical lines.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. And so, look, they are involved in the arms business, and they're going to continue to be involved in the arms business. And I think the other thing that I find disturbing about Dario Amodei, in line with a lot of tech CEOs, is he's starting to speak in a political way. He's not speaking like a tech boss. He's starting to speak like a politician. Because when it comes to sort of his ethics and the ethics of the company, he talks about how Anthropic is going to sort of use AI to achieve robust military superiority for democracies, how he's really worried about the rise of autocracy. And the ethical way that Anthropic AI is going to be used is on behalf of democracies to fight against autocracies. Again, give me strength. I'm going to assume that Dario Amodei believes that the US is a democracy. Look at the number of people and the number of illegal invasions that the US has been involved in over the years. But, you know, more importantly, I bet Dario Amodei sees Israel as a democracy. So it's okay to sell Israel arms. It's okay to have Israel presumably use Anthropic AI if he's happy to provide it to democracies. All the while, this quote unquote democracy is carrying out a genocide in Gaza, you know. But I wouldn't go so far as to sell anything to the Russians. I mean, it's complete nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're all equally terrifying. Technology is so equally open to abuse from all fronts. Even as you say, that if there's like some minor technical lines with what they won't, and it's only what they won't do now. I mean, maybe the reason they're there is because they're actually really stung by that idea that they're woke. And they're sort of like, well, that's bad for business, right? I wanted to do a little bit of market segmentation, which was like, well, our AI is not ready to pull the trigger yet, so we won't sell this to you. But I'm going to go to these far right conferences so that people don't mistake me for, mistake my business for a mad lefty business.
I also almost forgot, Claude was used apparently during the abduction of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Right, they used Claude.
Yes, it was.
And
yeah.
they asked Amodei about that, and he gave this really mealy-mouthed, slippery answer that was just not satisfactory at all. You know, he definitely appeared like he was not that bothered. And so again, it's like, I'm ethical if I only support Western democracy. Which we all know how destructive Western quote-unquote democracy can be.
And we also know how bad for business being ethical can be. So, yeah, that's probably the full circle there.